ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदादतं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः। Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, Srimad Kathita, recorded by Mahendranath Gupta, M., a disciple of the Master. Here is a very interesting context in the Kathamrita, very deep, apparently simplistic. ईश्वर सर्वभूते आছেন তবে ভালো লোকের সঙ্গে মাখামাখি চলে, মন্দ লোকের কাছ থেকে তফাতে থাকতে হয়। বাঘের ভিতর নারায়ণ আছেন তা বলে বাঘকে আলিঙ্গন করা চলে না। সকলের হাস্য। যদি বলো বাঘ তো নারায়ণ, তবে কেন পালাবো? তার উত্তর, যারা বলছে পালিয়ে এসো তারাও তো নারায়ণ, তাদের কথা কেন না শুনি। It's a very, very interesting statement he is making here. God resides in all beings. Sarva Bhute Narayan. Narayana, God, the Supreme Being, is present in the hearts of all beings. That does not mean that you should mix with all kinds of people equally. He says for good people, spiritual people, noble souls, you should have intimacy, you should have contact. But people who are wicked, vicious, unspiritual, keep a safe distance. Don't hate them. Don't be inimical to them. Don't have any sense of acrimony and rancor within your heart. But from a distance, mentally salute and keep away. He gives a beautiful example. বাঘের ভিতর নারায়ণ আছেন তাহলে বাঘকে আলিঙ্গন করা চলে না। God is there in the tiger also. That does not mean you should go and embrace the tiger. And he raises the question, যদি বলো বাঘ তো নারায়ণ, তবে কেন পালাবো? Suppose you ask, why should I run away from a tiger or an animal, a cruel animal or a wicked person? Because God is there in him also. Then the beautiful answer he gives, those who tell you to keep away from such a wicked people, they are also Narayan, they are also gods. So why don't you listen to these Narayanas who tell you to keep away? Very, very subtle argument. Then he tells a story. The story is very famous. একটা গল্প শোনো। শ্রী রামকৃষ্ণ's Galpa Raja, just as Upama Kalidasasya, Upama Ramakrishnasya, they say. All these great avatars, incarnations of God, prophets, they spoke in parables and stories so that ordinary people like us who do not have any subtle philosophical insight can easily understand the meaning of the spiritual truths. These stories appear to be so simple, but they're extremely profound. Jesus spoke in parables, Buddha spoke in parables, Sri Ramakrishna, of course, full of parables and stories. একটা গল্প শোন, লিসেন টু এ স্টোরি। কোনো এক বনে একটি সাধু থাকেন, তার অনেকগুলো শিষ্য। তিনি একদিন শিষ্যদের উপদেশ দিলেন যে সর্বভূতে নারায়ণ আছেন, একটি জেনে সকলকে নমস্কার করবে। So there was a sadhu, there's a holy man who lived in a forest and a large number of disciples, followers. One day, in a very highly spiritual mood, the spiritual teacher, the guru, the holy man, gave the following instruction to his disciples. My dear students, devotees, disciples, God resides in all beings. He is the Antaryami, indwelling regulator of everybody. Knowing this, you should bow down with respect to all. A very simple teaching. Then what happened? একদিন একটি শিষ্য হোমের জন্য কাঠ আনতে বনে গেল। এমন সময় একটা রব উঠল, কে কোথায় আছো, পালাও পালাও, একটা পাগলা হাতিয়ে যাচ্ছে। To collect some firewood for Homa, fire sacrifice, he went to a forest. When he was collecting wood, there was a big noise everywhere. People were shouting, hey, run away, run away. The mad elephant is coming. The elephant has gone mad. Matta Hati, mad elephant is terrible. It becomes so restless, it becomes violent. Usually elephants are very docile and calm, but when they become mad, they become absolutely reckless. So there is a huge noise, run away, run away. সবাই পালিয়ে গেল, কিন্তু শিষ্যটি পালালো না। সে জানে যে হাতিও যে নারায়ণ, তবে কেন পালাবো, এই বলে দাঁড়িয়ে রইল। নমস্কার করে স্তুতি স্তব করতে লাগলো। But this disciple knew, he has learned from his guru, he has felt in his heart of hearts that all beings have Narayana, God in them, and the Hati also is a form of God. So why should I run away? So he stood still. Seeing the mad elephant rushing towards him from a distance, he stood there with great respect. He bowed down and started singing the glory of Narayana. Oh Hati Narayana, I bow down, salute before you. এইদিকে মাহুর চেঁচিয়ে বলছে, পালাও পালাও। শিষ্যটি তবুও নড়ল না। The Mahut means the rider of the elephant. He could not control the elephant. The elephant was not a wild elephant. It was domesticated. And a Mahut, the rider of the elephant, the driver of the elephant was sitting on the back, but he could not control. He was shouting to everybody, run away, run away. Then the Mahut, when the elephant is approaching this devotee, the Sishya, the disciple, the Mahut told him, hey man, run away, run away. Elephant has become mad, he'll attack you. Sishyasti tabuvo nodlo na. The disciple even then did not move, started singing the praise of Narayana. শেষে হাতিটা সুড়ে করে তুলে নিয়ে তাকে একেবারে ছুঁড়ে ফেলে দিল, চলে গেল। শিষ্য ক্ষতি বিক্ষত হয়ে অচৈতন্য হয়ে পড়ে রইল। So the elephant came and attacked him, and then with his tusk it simply picked him up and then whirled him around, threw him at a distance and walked away. And this disciple was thrown far away, and with bruises all over the body and terrible pain, and he became unconscious. এই সংবাদ পেয়ে গুরু আর অন্যান্য শিষ্যরা তাকে আশ্রমে ধরাধরি করে নিয়ে গেল আর ঔষধ দিতে লাগলো। অনেকক্ষণ পরে চৈতন্য হলে ওকে কেউ জিজ্ঞাসা করলে, তুমি হাতি আসছে শুনেও কেন চলে গেলে না? So the disciples came running. They took their brother disciple to the ashrama, gave him some water to drink, medicines, and nursed the wounds, and slowly he regained consciousness. Then the disciples asked him, "Hurry, you fool! The Mahut was shouting, 'Run away, run away. Why did you not run away?'" সে বললে, গুরুদেব আমায় বলে গিয়েছিলেন যে নারায়ণী মানুষ, জীবজন্তু সব হয়েছেন, তাই আমি হাতে নারায়ণ আসছে দেখে সেখান থেকে সরে যাইনি। my Gurudeva, spiritual teacher, has told me clearly that God is in all beings, animals, men, women, all of them are forms of God, forms of divinity. So having known this and felt this, I thought, why should I run away from this elephant? Elephant is also a form of God. Then the disciple told us, and the Guru came, hearing this statement of the disciple. Guru told him, Baba, হাতি নারায়ণ আসছিলেন বটে, তা সত্য, কিন্তু বাবা মাহুত নারায়ণ তো তোমায় বারণ করেছিলেন। যদি সবই নারায়ণ, তবে তার কথা বিশ্বাস করলে না কেন? মাহুত নারায়ণের কথাও শুনতে হয়। সকলেরই হাস্য। Then the Guru told him, my child, of course I told you, even now I tell you, I teach you that God is everywhere. All the beings are forms of God. Of course it is true. But when the Mahut Narayana, the Narayana in the form of Mahut, the driver of the elephant, was telling you repeatedly, was shouting at you to run away, why did you not listen to the Mahut Narayana, the driver Narayana, the driver god of the elephant? You should have listened to the Mahut Narayana and should have run away. Everybody laughs. This story appears to be so innocent, so simplistic. But listen to the voice of Sri Ramakrishna ringing through this story, and according to Swami Vivekananda, resolving a riddle, a puzzle, a terrible conflict which has been raging over eons and ages, millennia after millennia, in the world of philosophy, in the world of religion, and in the world of science and ordinary common life. What is that? The conflict between free will and predeterminism. Shadi Nichha and Vidhi, fate. It is said in Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasanga, the magnum opus of Swami Sharadanandaji, which is in a sense the life of Ramakrishna, but in a sense much more than a mere biography, as Swami Tapasyanandaji once put it. The Leela Prasanga, translated originally as Sri Ramakrishna the Great Master, and retranslated again by Swami Chetananandaji, as a Sri Ramakrishna's divine play, Swami Tapasyan used to say, this book, the magnum opus of Swami Sharadanandaji, is a treatise on the psychology of the incarnation of God. The inner functioning, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, spiritual experiences, nirvikalpa samadhi, transcendental and immanent experiences, all that goes on within the incarnation's own soul, unknown to humanity, has been portrayed as much as possible in this huge, voluminous and magnanimous treatise. Is a treatise on the psychology of the incarnation of God. Swami Sharadananda refers to a wonderful incident which actually happened on this story. Swami Vivekananda once made a statement to one of his friends. From every statement of Sri Ramakrishna, several volumes of books can be written. Every saying of his can be elaborated, interpreted, and understood through volumes and volumes of treatises. So profound is Sri Ramakrishna's teaching. The other friend could not quite accept this, thinking that perhaps Swami Vivekananda is exaggerating out of his excessive devotion for the Guru. He quietly said, I don't exactly understand how it is possible, how it is realistic to imagine that every word, every line of Ramakrishna, every teaching of Ramakrishna can be expanded and understood through several volumes of books. Then Swami Vivekananda's characteristic nonchalance, he said, that's because you don't have the brains to understand it. Give me any teaching and I will explain to you. Then it is recorded in the Leela Prasanga, Ramakrishna, the great master, by Swami Sharadanandaji, that the friend told Swami Vivekananda, can you please explain this story of the Mahut god and the Hathi Narayan and the Mahut Narayan, the elephant god and the driver god? I don't quite understand the significance of this, although it is very simple on the face of it. It is said, Swami Vivekananda started explaining this. 3 full days and nights he went on non-stop to explain the significance of this story till the friend was simply flabbergasted and astounded, wonderstruck. Swami Vivekananda showed that this story gives a resolution of the great conflict which has been raging millennia upon millennia in all religions, philosophies, science as well as daily life, between free will and predetermination. Whether everybody has a free will, Shadi Nichha, are we free to function as we like, or is everything predetermined by fate. So many arguments have been advanced for, against the idea of free will and predetermination. Swami Vivekananda, it seems, explained this story to show that how a beautiful resolution has been made of this conflict through this story. Narayana, God is there in the Hathi, in the elephant, also in the Mahut. There is a space allowed for each one of us in this world in which to exercise the will which God Himself has put in us. The free will which we think we exercise is actually put into every being by God Himself. God gives you the freedom to act up to a point, and globally, entirety, if you look at it, is completely determined by the will of God. So there is a global, local synthesis in this story. Globally, there is no free will. Everything is completely and totally, absolutely determined by the will of God. But locally, as God residing in each one of us, the beings, there is a space given to each of us to exercise the free will which God Himself has put into you. It is just like you are playing a game of soccer, football, cricket. When you are in it, locally playing the game, you have to be extremely careful, discerning, watching every ball in cricket and watching the only ball which is there in football. And every moment you are extremely alert to see that this ball is put into the goal in the case of soccer or football, or how the ball can be sent to the fence in the case of a batsman for 4 or 6, or how the ball can tumble the stumps and wickets can be taken in the case of a bowler. So there is no question of God's will. The bowler, suppose he says, by the will of God, I don't know whether I'm going to take a wicket, let me bowl. He'll be a bad bowler. If the batsman says it's by the will of God, let me see how many runs I can score. Or the fielder says, by the will of God, I may be able to take this catch or not. That will be silly. So you have to exercise your little will there. And globally, if you look at the whole thing, it is God who has put you that will. The alertness that you have to take a catch, and the alacrity with which you have footwork, and the promptness with which you are running between the wickets, and the power with which you drive your shots so that the ball reaches the fence. All these faculties are given to you by the will of God, and God gives you that wisdom to be able to exercise that will cleverly, intelligently, carefully, so that you win the match. Look at this, meditate upon this idea. Contemplate this wonderful resolution of Swami Sri Ramakrishna, through this story. that everything is God. That is the teaching of the Guru, which is absolutely true, globally. But locally, there is a particular situation in which God asks you to exercise your will as provided to you by God Himself. Think of this. When the mad elephant was rushing towards the disciple was taking a global view that everything is God, I don't need to move away. But the local view, the local situation demanded that he shall listen to the voice of the Mahut God, the driver of the elephant God, rather than thinking of elephant itself as God. That Mahut is a small inner voice in all of us. That inner voice of conscience, inner voice of consciousness. That Antaryami, God Himself, is speaking from within you, guiding you, moving you, empowering you, and at every point elevating you so that you reach the highest goal. God resides in all beings as an omnipresence, omnipotence, and omniscience. Sarva Vyapitva, Sarva Shaktimayatva, and Sarvagyatva. But He is also residing in your heart of hearts, the innermost consciousness, as your indwelling regulator called Antaryami. That Antaryami speaks to you, whispers to you, powerfully and silently, and you can hear this whisper, listen to this voice of God coming from within you, provided your mind is absolutely silent, provided your mind is elevated and noble and pure. This is called the Dhi in the Gayatri Mantra. Dhiyo yo nah prachodayat Om Bhur Bhuvasva Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo yo nah prachodayat Om. Tat Savitur Varenyam Bharga, that supreme, adorable, divine effulgence. Devasya, Deva is divinity, effulgent, luminous. I meditate on the luminosity of the divine being who is symbolized by the sun, Savitur Varenyam, adorable. Dhiyo yo nah prachodayat. May that supreme being, the luminous Atman or Brahman, kindle, awaken my Dhi, inner, higher spiritual intelligence. A Dhi is not intellect. Buddhi is also used equivalent to Dhi, not the ordinary Buddhi of the intellect by which you learn physics and chemistry and mathematics and secular sciences and arts, but that Dhi, which is called Medha in the Medha Suktam, which is called Pragya in Yoga Sutra of Patanjali. That is the inner voice which is constantly telling you what you should do and what you should not do. Globally, the whole thing is pervaded by God. But locally, There are pockets of awareness in which God operates, teaches, illumines, kindles your inner being, and gives you a direction in life. When it is said God is all pervading, present everywhere, that's a global view. But unless you have transcended the limitations of your body and mind and intellect, completely lost the local method of functioning as an entity, as a jiva, you need to balance these local and global viewpoints. When you see the whole world is pervaded by God, your individuality is completely gone, and you no longer feel you are confined to the body. You have to abide by the rules of the game of the local. I am encased in a body, I have a mind, I have an intelligence, I have some senses. And the rules of the game of the local have to be followed, which are once again rules made by God. So the Mahut Narayana, the driver God, who is inspiring my entire being from within, this Mahut Narayana is also God sitting in my heart of hearts and guiding my entire being and my life. So why don't you listen to that? This story, therefore, is a high philosophical resolution of the conflict of free will and predetermination on the one hand. On the other hand, it is also a great guide for our daily life. In our daily life, apart from the great philosophical and spiritual truths which are in the scriptures, you have certain rules made for local living. That's why Vedanta, the great philosophical system, which is one of the 6 darshanas, systems of Indian philosophy, has 3 canons called prasthana: Shruti prasthana, Smriti prasthana, and Nyaya prasthana. Shruti prasthana are the Upanishads. They give the highest philosophical truth. Sarvam khalvidam brahma, Ishavasyamidam sarvam mitkincha jagatyam jagat, na jayate mriyate va kutaschannayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuya, ajo nitya shashvadoyam purano. Speaking about the Atman, the Kathopanishad, this is infinite and immortal, it doesn't die. This is the highest truth. But how to make that truth applicable at the local level in daily life and realize it through daily transactions through the body and through the mind and senses is the Smriti, which is called the Bhagavad Gita. Like the Kathamrita, for example, the Bhagavad Gita also discusses in detail about the qualities of wicked people. What are the Daivi Sampat and the Asuri Sampat? Qualities of godly, divine qualities and demonic qualities. He discusses, the Bhagavan Sri Krishna, in the later chapters, how a person who is wicked, greedy, voluptuous, untruthful, how does he function, how does he move about, what are the characteristics? You may think these are unspiritual thoughts. No. You have to live in this world and the body and the mind. And the local game has local rules to be followed. With desperateness you play the game, dead seriously, at the end of the game you do not succeed. Then laugh it away and come away. Globally, you know it's a game, and therefore you laugh it away. Locally, you know it has to be played with tremendous seriousness of purpose. So the balancing of the local and the global is what is perhaps indicated, is my understanding, in this great story of Ramakrishna, of the elephant god and the Mahut god. Hathi Narayan, Mahut Narayan. Everything in the universe is predetermined in a sense. Because everything is only Prakriti. Prakriti is Jada. Everything Jada completely is predetermined by certain rules of Jadatva, inertness. The physical sciences, physics and chemistry and all of them, dealing with physical matter completely determined by physical laws, are all predetermined. You can exactly say now what will be the position of this earth, the sun, the moon after 100 years. When will the next solar eclipse occur? You can exactly predict now, because it's all predetermined. The orbit of the sun and the moon and the stars and the various planets, these orbits are all predetermined. Nothing can change them because they rotate according to certain fixed, predetermined, given, inexorable laws of the physical science. But when you come to the mind, it is very different. Even then you can talk about the laws of the mind, the mental science, which is what psychology is all about. The psychologists have certain laws, but there they can't really say that this is inexorable, this is predetermined. To some extent you can say there are certain determined laws. But going beyond the life, consciousness, these can't be predetermined by certain laws. There are spiritual laws to boot, but the spiritual laws, are they inexorable, inviolable, predetermined, or is a spirituality flowing through the individual subject to certain individual modification, change, free will? This is a very big question. Julian Huxley, the famous biologist, once said, consciousness introduces something which is unpredictable. You can exactly predict the orbit of the earth and the sun and the moon, but you can't predict the orbit of a common housefly, a common mosquito. A mosquito is sitting here. Next, from here, where it will go, nobody knows. Sometimes the mosquitoes are very clever. You try to touch them and drive them away. By the time you go there, it flies from there to that place and then looks at you, know what? You can't predict. There is an unpredictability in human consciousness. This was a very, very famous debate in the world of physical science between Albert Einstein, one of the most outstanding scientists and physicists of all time, and Niels Bohr, an equally great physicist. Predeterminism and free will. Probability. Probability means it's uncertain. It may be, may not be. Einstein could not believe in the probabilistic interpretation of wave mechanics and quantum mechanics. 1900, the quantum theory of Max Planck came to be known. That light travels in quanta, a quantum which has an energy proportional to the frequency of radiation, and the proportionality constant being the Planck's constant h, Max Planck. E equals h nu. Energy of a quantum E equals Max Planck's constant h multiplied by nu, which is the frequency of radiation. It's a peculiar hybrid of the wave theory and the particle theory. Does light travel as particles, corpuscles? Newton had the idea of corpuscles, Newton's corpuscular theory. Later on, when Huygens came and discovered the wave theory, Newton's theory became out of vogue. And when the quantum theory came, these two theories were blended in a peculiar synthesis. Light travels as quanta. What is a quantum? Quantum is an energy packet. What is the energy of each quantum? Proportional to the frequency of radiation. And the frequency is, of course, a wave concept. Thereafter was developed the wave mechanics by Schrödinger and the quantum mechanics by Heisenberg, two outstanding philosopher scientists. Both of them were deeply influenced by Indian thought and Vedanta. It is said one of the most favorite of books by Schrödinger was the Brahma Sutra Bhashya of Shankaracharya, the commentary on Brahma Sutra. Heisenberg was fascinated by Vedanta and Indian thought. What is the interpretation of wave mechanics? If light behaves like a quanta, particles traveling, then it should be manifested in an experiment which Einstein proved in the photoelectric effect. He got the Nobel Prize for it. Then came the idea of wave-particle dualism, thanks to de Broglie, in which he said a fast-moving particle behaves like a wave. Is light a wave, light a particle? If it behaves like a wave, it should be subjected to the laws of wave mechanics, like diffraction, interference, polarization, and so on. And a beam of electrons were actually found to produce interference patterns, diffraction patterns. The whole world of science was flabbergasted and shaken to foundations. What is this? Nature of light, nature of radiation. nature of matter. Physics, which is the science of matter, does not know what is matter. The deeper and deeper you penetrate, the vaster and vaster is the range of knowledge. The greater and greater is the level of ignorance. As Eddington, the contemporary of Einstein and a famous astrophysicist, once said, every piece of knowledge is gained at the expense of a piece of ignorance. It is impossible to empty the well of truth with a leaky bucket. The leaky bucket is your intellect. With this intellect, you think you can completely empty the well of truth, understand everything. But the moment you learn something, immediately there is also a corresponding ignorance which comes in. In Vedanta, it's called Maya. Maya is only Dvandva, duality, heat and cold, joy and sorrow. The moment there is some joy, there is a sorrow also, light and darkness. The pairs of opposites called Dvandva. These are naturally inbuilt in the world of relativity, in the world of nature. It is just like saying we should try to construct a stick with only one end. Oh, there are two ends in the stick. Let me try to break the stick at one end. The moment you break it, one end again appears there. It is just an inbuilt nature of the whole universe of relativity in which these pairs of opposites occur. Wherever there is knowledge, there is also ignorance. And therefore, Vedanta says, go beyond jnana and ajnana, knowledge and ignorance. Beyond knowledge and ignorance, there is neither knowledge nor ignorance, but both fused together in something which can't be described. You can find the solutions to the world and the relative sphere only through transcending them. A problem can be solved either by trying to solve the problem or dissolving the problem. Do you want solution or dissolution? How do you dissolve a problem? Transcend the problem and the problem itself vanishes. So you can solve a problem through transcendence or try to solve the problem by tackling the problem at the level in which it is created, which you can never do satisfactorily. So Einstein made a beautiful statement which said, the solution to a problem cannot happen at the same level at which the problem was initially created. I am dreaming that a tiger is chasing me, and desperately I am running for my life, panting for breath, and I have dashed against a rock and fall down. Suddenly I wake up. Oh, what a relief. Look at this example. Was the problem of the chasing tiger solved? Yes or no? If you say yes, that the problem of the chasing tiger should have been solved by killing the tiger in the dream, that didn't happen. If you say no, you are getting so much of relief out of the chasing tiger. What happened? So analyze this example. What has happened is, the problem of the chasing tiger existed at a particular level of consciousness which you call is a dreaming state of consciousness. The moment I transformed to a different state of consciousness, this is called transformation. Einstein, in physics, we talk about Lorentz transformation. You transform to a different plane of consciousness in which the tiger doesn't exist. Where did the tiger go? Tiger is dissolved in my own consciousness. So the problem of the chasing tiger can be solved by killing the tiger in the dream, or it can be dissolved by your awakening from the dream state in the waking state, in which the problem of the chasing tiger in the dream simply gets dissolved and vanishes. This is exactly what Vedanta teaches. We are trying to solve the problem in the world, my worries, my depressions, my anxieties. The COVID-19 anxiety is upon everybody now. Fear of death, fear of sorrow, fear of losing something, fear of loneliness. All these various fears and sorrows, we are trying to solve at the level of the waking state of duality. Endlessly trying, chasing the will of the wisp, as it were, and feeling miserably at every point and crying. Vedanta comes and tells you, the Shruti and the Upanishads and the Gita and the great prophets and the incarnations come and tell you. Sri Ramakrishna comes and tells you through the Kathamrita, wake up from this dream. Don't try to solve the problem when you are in the waking state, experienced by you in the waking state, at the level of the waking state. Awaken from the waking state. Wake up from the waking state. When we are in the waking state, we are actually asleep. Vedanta tell you that you are actually sleeping in the ignorance, which is anadi, in beginningless ignorance. You are sleeping unaware of your divine conscious nature. Wake up from your waking state so that you can intuit the divine and realize that the problems which existed during the waking state are dissolved when you awaken from there and enter into a state of turiya, or the supreme consciousness which is beyond the ordinary consciousness, called the super conscious state. This is the only way by which to solve the problems. So when matter also was known to have wave characteristics, then wave will have matter characteristics, which is what quantum says. So what's the real nature of matter, real nature of radiation? When the quantum theory developed, they wanted to interpret this scientifically and philosophically. Max Born came up with what is known as the probabilistic interpretation of quantum mechanics. You can't exactly say where the electron is, for which you have to observe the electron. To observe the electron, you have to throw a quantum of light over the electron to be able to see it. And the impingement of the quantum on the electron will dislocate the electron and you can't see the electron as existing at the state or location in which it was before you hit it. Very interesting, complex phenomenon of seeing. You are actually disturbing the electron by looking at it. So if you don't want to disturb the electron, don't look at it. If you don't look at it, you can never know it. So knowledge itself implies disturbing that which is observed, and that which is observed, when it is disturbed and distorted, it can't appear in its own original pristine nature before you began to observe it. It's a terrible paradox. So this idea of quantum mechanics and what is observation, what is the role of an observer, endless debate has been going on even now. The role of the observer, where consciousness comes in. There is no such thing called objective observation. The moment you observe, the observer, which is you, get deeply involved in the act of observation, thereby distorting the entity which you wanted to observe before you entered into the act of observation. Even simple observation is such a complex phenomenon. So how do you solve this problem? So the interpretation of quantum mechanics came to be probabilistic. So you can't exactly say the electron is here and now. All that you can say is that the probability of the electron being here is such and such. If the probability is very large, then it's very likely that the electron should be there. The whole world is one of probabilities. Interestingly, Swami Vivekananda, in a lecture on my master, given in the 1890s, he says, the whole world is one of probabilities. Long before the idea of probabilistic interpretation came in. Einstein could not swallow this or digest it. Einstein said, what? Nothing is determined. Everything is only maybe. This comes very close to the Syadvada of the Jainism, Jainist philosophers. Jain philosophers of the Syadvada, Syad in can be translated in English, maybe. Is it there? Maybe it is there, maybe it is not there. Maybe, may not be. Paradigm means you can't definitively, exactly pronounce anything. Then came the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, in which he said the position and momentum of an electron cannot be exactly simultaneously measured. There is a gap in our understanding. There is an uncertainty limit called indeterminism. You can't determine exactly. The principle of uncertainty or indeterminism, there is a limit beyond which you just can't go. It is nature's design that it shall not give out all its secrets immediately. It can come very close, but not exactly. So exactitude, precision is ruled out in the micro world of the atoms and the electrons and protons and quantum mechanics. Einstein was flabbergasted and furious, having been trained in the Judeo-Christian paradigm, God is rigid, He is a God of justice, He gives the rules, which are inviolable rules. This is where the story occurs. Inviolable rule is God is everywhere, God is everything. But there you have a small uncertainty, which is the Mahut Narayan's voice. The small voice from within, the Mahut God, the driver sitting on the elephants, he says, "Hey, run away, run away." Why don't you listen to the Mahut God? The small space which is given to you to operate. In a sense it is determinative, in a sense it is not. In the macro world, in the world of the planets and the nebulae and the stars and the sun and the moon, it's all deterministic. In the micro world, the world of the atoms and electrons and particles, it is indeterminism, uncertainty, probabilistic. So the balance of these two is our whole life. Einstein, it seems, said, "I do not believe that God plays dice." In a game of dice, you say, maybe 10, maybe 5. You throw dice, it could be anything. I do not believe that God plays dice, to which Niels Bohr is supposed to have quipped. But you can't dictate to God what He should do. Remember Ramakrishna's statement in the Gospel, "Ma Jagadamba Ichhamoyi, Shokoli Tomar Ichha, Ichhamoyi Tara Tumi, Tomar Karma Tumi Koroma, Loke Bole Kori Ami." Ichhamoyi Tara Tumi. You are Ichhamoyi and you are free. Your will is free, but individual wills of human beings is not free. You have bound it by your will, giving a small space to operate. When individual wills are tuned to, connected with, become one with the divine will, all the problem is solved. This is called Atma Brahma Aikya. What Ramakrishna called the salt doll getting merged into the ocean. There is no life, there is no death, there is no birth, there is no action, there is no movement. Everything is still unconscious. But when you actually begin to operate in life, you have this macro, cosmic, microcosmic and macrocosmic, the global and local balancing, which is beautifully exemplified in this very, very simple story of Sri Ramakrishna. What exactly Swami Vivekananda said for 3 days and nights we do not know, but what little understanding we can get, it behoves us to carefully think about this, meditate, contemplate, and get newer and newer light from every word, every line, every teaching of Sri Ramakrishna. That is the great benefit of studying this Gospel of Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita, diving deep into this and drinking deep of this nectar, Amrita of Ramakrishna Katha, Ramakrishna Vachana, the Word of God. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukampa Vigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.